Is 9:06. Today is Friday, November 15th, 2024, and I will call to order this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board. Welcome everybody in from the chilly fall weather. We will begin with the pledges of allegiance. Ms. Sprinkle will lead us. Okay, agenda item number 2, roll call and discussion of possible action for member absences. We don't have any absences today, so we will just do roll call.
Chair Sarah Oates.
Present.
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 Chance Bolden.
Present.
Rolando Castro.
Present.
Sean Eichelberger.
Present.
Paula Escalante-Castillo.
Present.
Stephanie Robinson.
Present.
Lisa Sprinkle.
Present.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Agenda item number 3 is our opening remarks and our mission moment. I anticipate that this is my last board meeting. I don't know that to be totally true, but my appointment is up in January and our next board meeting is in February. So I am operating under that assumption today. And so I just wanted to take the mission moment to say a few words. I would prefer not to come back and have any fanfare after my term is over, and so I just wanted to take a few moments today to say thank you to everyone. You know, when I started this in 2019, when I was appointed, it came sort of as a surprise to me, but I certainly, appreciated the effort. And being a 4th-generation Texan and a 2nd-generation appraiser, it made sense for me, and I have been honored to serve both my state and my community in this way. It felt like a really good fit for me. When I started, we had a little bit of a mountain to climb. We had just been through a tough sunset, and in preparation for today, thinking about the things that I wanted to talk about, our accomplishments, I sort of thought, we could go into the details and enforcement and education, licensing, budget, all of those things. But really what I hope is that the average license holder and the average Texan feels that this is a different agency than it was 5.5 years ago. And if we've done that, then I think that we have accomplished what we set out to do, that they just know that if they get a complaint filed against them, that it's going to be a fair process, that if they need to file a complaint, that it's going to be a fair process, and that when they renew, the vast majority of our license holders, the only interaction that they have with this agency is when they renew or, when they originally apply. And so I hope that that process, even that simple process is a little bit better or easier than it was before. I'm proud to say that I think that from the enforcement standpoint that appraisers hopefully feel that it's going to be more fair. The meeting before I started as chair, I came and sat in the audience, and there was a respondent from an enforcement case that spoke, and I've talked about his testimony several times over the years, and it felt to me like he felt alone and defeated, and I hope that that never happens to a license holder in the state of Texas again. But at the same time, we just recently revoked a license of an appraiser that was appraising multiple properties in multiple states at the same time by using unlicensed people who had not had background checks going into people's homes. And We had the resources and the desire to do a full investigation, and I think we were either the only state that revoked his license or maybe one of only two, while the other states simply gave probation and fines and that sort of thing. And I'm proud to say that in Texas, you can't send unknown people into homes, that we are not going to stand for that. That's not going to happen in the state of Texas. So I'm proud of both sides of enforcement in that way. And so I would like to thank Governor Abbott for the confidence in asking me to do this and the opportunity to do it, and his staff who answered my many, many questions that I had along the way, for their patience with this transition. I would like to thank not only the 8 board members that are sitting here today, but the other ones along the way that have served with me, for your willingness. You know, these are volunteers. They're volunteering their time to serve the state of Texas and to serve the fellow license holders. And they attend committee meetings, they attend board meetings, they travel to conferences, they do training. There, you know, there's a lot involved, and it's all volunteer work. And I just appreciate that. Anytime I've asked any of you to dig into something, you've done so, and you have fought for your convictions, but also been willing to compromise so that we could come up with good solutions. I hope that you all are proud of the work that we have all done together and the way that we have served this great state. And I hope that we've had some fun along the way. I want to thank Scott Kessner and all of the commissioners over on the Real Estate Commission. Scott and I were appointed at the same time, and so we sort of, held hands in the beginning and jumped in feet first together. And we've had a great relationship with them and have appreciated all the collaboration over the years. And of course, lastly, to staff, Executive Director Buckholtz came on board as the leader at the same time that I was appointed. And so I talk about this also very often. When in early 2020, I said there's going to be some rough waters ahead, but I think if we do the work now, that there will be, we will sail into smoother waters, and then hopefully it won't, hopefully you won't be hearing from me quite so often. And she was absolutely eager to do that. And then of course COVID hit, and she had everything on the commission side, everything on the board side. She had a young child at home at the time, and COVID hit, and somehow we still managed to do it all and get through it all. And without her leadership and her willingness to say yes, or we are going to do our best, or we're going to try, but at the same time standing for her convictions of what she thought this agency needed to be, always advocating for her staff, always. In behind closed doors, in open meetings, always making sure that her staff was considered in the process. None of this obviously would have been possible without that willingness. And I recall in those early days walking the halls upstairs with you, and at one point we were talking and you stopped. I said, I haven't been able to get that information, and you stopped and you put your hand on my arm and you said, whatever in this building you need or want access to, you absolutely can have. And that was much different than how it had been previously. And so that sort of set the tone for the next 5 years, that this was going to be a collaborative effort. And it certainly has been. And I hope that we haven't frustrated you too much. And of course, General Counsel Santos also came on shortly after I started, and we have so appreciated the easy working relationship that we have had with you. You had to become a subject matter expert in appraisal regulation, federal and state, and you did so beautifully, and have accomplished that and more. So we certainly appreciate working with you. And I would say that all of staff, communications was already kind of underway before I got here, but every part of staff has been has risen to the challenge and has answered our redundant and relentless questions and done all the things that we have asked of you, and so we certainly appreciate it. And of course, Director Tran, who was here before I came here, but is now in a leadership position because Executive Director Buchholz saw in her the potential and obviously recognized what she was capable of doing. And so when I started, I don't know if you all remember, but I said, we were getting a lot of no's, and it was because the federal agency, the ASC, would give us a bad grade. Texas was a leader amongst all of the regulatory agencies of the state, and finally I said, I don't care. As long as we get a C or a D, I don't care about an A+. As long as we are able to service mortgages in the state of Texas, my focus and my priority is Texas and Texans, and not what's going on in Washington. And so if we have to get a C or a D to accomplish these things, I'm okay with that. And somehow Director Tran figured out how to move audits under licensing and made that work, and we're still complying, and how to process enforcement cases and comply with what we need to comply to, but still make it fair. And without that determination, I'm not sure how all these years later, with all the changes that we've made, that we still got an A for our last report card. And at the same time, Texas is still considered a leader among the states. Director Tran has been asked to testify on the national level about some of her initiatives. She's gotten awards, and I think that is a testament to those above her and those below her. And again, with all of staff, I just can't say how much I appreciate being willing to go on this journey with me. And I hope you also are proud of what you've done. When people talk about the American dream, one of the few things that are on that list is home ownership or starting a business, and we are part of that. And that matters, and it's important, and that we can do it well, I think is something to be proud of. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity. It has been a lot of fun, a lot of learning, and I think we should have a short meeting today, which again, I hope is that we haven't cut anything important out, but we've streamlined some things. And so let's get down to the business that we're here to do. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now is agenda item number 4, which is a time for public comment. And I think we may have had somebody who wanted to speak, so I will open the floor to that. If not, you can always reach out to us by either email or joining a committee meeting to discuss any topics. Agenda item number 5 is the ratification of the official record of the August 16, 2024 board meeting as approved for posting on the website by the Secretary of the Board, and this is on page 7 in our materials. So if nobody has identified any changes, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Reed Lynch.
Yes, I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. McAnally. All those in any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. The next item is our enforcement matters. Agenda item number 6, the final orders in the matters of A, B, C, and D. These are on page 12 in our materials, and we also have some supplemental materials, I think, for 6 and for 7. This doesn't require any for us to do anything, and we didn't have anybody who asked to comment on these, so these are just there for our record. On agenda item number 7, we had a modification, and this is also in your supplemental materials. So unless anybody has any questions, we can just pass on it. Between the time that we post the agenda and today's meeting, the respondent and the staff were able to work out modifications for the order. So per our rules and policy, we handle the approval process like agreed final orders, and you can see in the supplemental materials the modified order. Thank you, staff, for working with the respondent to get that done. Agenda item number 8 is the report by the AMC Advisory Committee. It's on page 33 in our materials. Mrs. Reed Lynch, is there anything that you would like for us to discuss?
I think the report says what needs to say. I'm fine with it.
Thank you, ma'am. I will note that one of the items on the agenda was that we realized that sort of the statute and the rules has kind of just been sitting there since inception in 2011, and we just want to kind of go piece by piece and make sure that each item is still relevant. It still makes sense to be in there. We just haven't looked at it. You know, we don't get a lot of activity on that side, and so we just want to kind of take a fresh look at it, and we're going to put a working group together to do that and go piece by piece. So that's going to be a little bit of an undertaking, so we appreciate all the effort that's going to go into that. Agenda item number 9 is the report by the Education and Licensing Committee. This is on page 35 in your materials. Mr. Castro.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to note, just discussing the interesting item that came out of this was the approval process of the practicum.
Oh, that's right.
There is a state that has a practicum program that is available for them to complete their experience credits in order to achieve their just as their process to get to the test and the license. And so we were just discussing how we could, in Texas, we don't have anything as of now that that we've approved at all. So, but if any, I guess if any educational entities were to make a practicum program, we were just trying to see what the process would be for accepting that, as it is part of our statute still. So it was just an interesting discussion, and something that we're going to go through once again in our next committee meeting. So just to reiterate. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that you reminded me of that. That sort of what came out of it was we want to make sure that our rules are in order, so that if somebody wants to do something in Texas, that that we're prepared for that, but also want to kind of let it be known that we are certainly open to the process. We know that it would be a big undertaking for us as a state to approve such a course, but like all other things, we're willing to give it a try if it's going to benefit our license holders in the state of Texas. Then we certainly want to be open to that, and so we want educational providers to know that we are open and willing to help make that happen if necessary.
Madam Chair, one more thing, just piggybacking on that. This would be kind of like the Perea program, but instead of us kind of accepting what the national criteria would be, like they said Perea was good, it should be good for everybody. Then it went to the states, and each state did their own thing. This would be more so we would have to review the program itself, and it would be on a case-by-case basis. So it would not be some other entity doing the legwork in reviewing the practicum program. It would be our internal staff doing the review. And so that was I mean, as she said, it'd be a pretty big undertaking that we haven't done before. It's not like reviewing just a class or anything. It is for the entire experience credit.
Is somebody showing interest in creating such a program?
So I believe there was one state that had a practicum program that is state approved. And so I think they're trying to look and see which other states may be interested in perhaps having a practicum program accepted as their experience credit. So we wanted to make sure that we were aware of that, and if staff had the capacity and how much time it would take, that kind of thing. But we haven't seen the practicum program itself.
So would this be effectively a competitor to Perea
It would be another avenue for the completion of your experience credit. As far as I know, it was just for the residential and license. So it would be somewhat similar in Perea in where you can't do your practicum unless they have a
Mr. Castro,
practicum.
do we want to ask either Ms. Wheeler or Ms. Tran
Oh,
to
yeah,
come up and,
go ahead.
because I feel like I'm not remembering all of it, but, and I want to make
I
sure
thought it
that
was
we're.
one state that we had, but anyway, go ahead.
To answer your question, Chance, yeah, there are 2 providers that are interested in having a program in Texas. Yeah.
And we obviously understand that if we approved a course and we didn't do so well, and we license people in an ineffective way, that is absolutely not what we want to do. So it would be a big undertaking and it would be difficult, but
Could I maybe ask
please.
what that looks like, us approving a course? Who's approving? How are they approving? Why are they approving?
Yeah, I think that's like the whole big conversation. So in the criteria, the practicum can either be approved at the AQB level, and if it was, then we would accept it, or at the state level. And so from what I've been hearing from the providers is that they're having a hard time getting through the AQB, so they're going to each of the states.
Now that makes sense.
Yeah, so like, right, so that was our first question, why would you go to each state rather than just go to the AQB? To address what that would look like, I think that's what we're figuring out. It would have to be like, I think we'd have to have some sort of criteria checklist so that every provider that comes in gets examined with the same criteria. Probably like an enforcement mechanism, to Chair Oates' points, like we don't want to approve somebody and have the program not go well and us not have the ability to take enforcement action if we needed to. So kind of just thinking through all of those things and seeing if it's
Does that create maybe some kind of liability for us? If we're, I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to think all the way through this.
I think the liability would be our own, that we would have license holders that were.
I mean, just to be clear, like, they would still have to take that national exam, this is just one part of what they can get, what they need to complete to get into the door. So they still need their education. This would satisfy the experience component, but at the end of the day, they still have to take the exam and pass.
Okay, so just so I can get an understanding, get on top of the understanding of this, the practicum, it includes both education and experience credits, or is it just the experience
It would just be
credits?
the experience component.
Okay,
But
that's
it's-
what I
but
thought it
I think it's
was.
more like a classroom, like it feels a little bit more like a classroom or more kind of teaching environment, I think is the,
Okay,
Be fair.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the questions that came up was, why are they having difficulty at the AQB? Is it because they're stringent, and we certainly don't want to be, that to be the reason that they come to us, because we're easier, so still exploring all of those things before and understanding that if we do it, we need to do it well.
So Melissa, do we have an understanding as to why they're trying to circumvent the AQB?
I'm going to meet with the AQB before I answer that. I've heard from providers, but I just want to confirm before I speak to that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yep.
And then, yeah, have we seen any of the framework for what they're proposing, those other Texas providers?
Yep, I met with one of the potential providers 2 weeks ago, and they kind of ran me through their program. It's what they've put together is really thought out. It looks like they've worked alongside the AQB on a lot of it.
Okay, great. And then can we add that to the next committee meeting to look at the framework? Just, I mean, I know it may not be finalized, but just so we kind of get a ballpark, like a visual of what all that may look like, that would be good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we need to keep the discussion ongoing so that when and if it happens, we're prepared, if that's even something, but that we know one way or the other that we're very well prepared to answer the question.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. And then you know me. So how's the other state doing with this? Because we got, one state that's already launched it, right? What are their success rates?
Mississippi, I think.
Mississippi, yeah, it's the MPAT program with Melissa Bond. So we hear a lot about that when we go to Aero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it has been done.
It has been done. Okay. So we got to get some best practices and,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Director Tran. Agenda item, I'm sorry, Mr. Castro, was there anything else that you wanted to? No, very good, thank you. Agenda item number 10, the report by the executive committee, that's on page 38 in our materials. I don't have anything from that I wanted to highlight. I did want to highlight at this time that the budget committee didn't meet during this, before this meeting. And we've had some long discussions about the budget and what to do with our surplus. And so given the fact that 3 of our terms end in January, 3 board members' terms end in January, I didn't want to start a discussion and start heading down the road of what the 9 of us agreed on, and then, we have a new makeup of the board come January that maybe has different priorities. I fully trust that this board, whether it's, a similar makeup or a much different makeup, can make a reasonable recommendations. I would like to be the one agency that doesn't find themselves with a surplus and just find new ways to spend it, that we actually give it back to the taxpayers. That would be my preference. But I trust you all to make the, prudent decisions about making sure that we have adequate enforcement and that we have adequate facilities to do all the things that we need to do. So I trust you all with that, and so we anticipate to have that board workshop probably between the February and May meeting. So there will be a time for all that to be hashed out. Moving on to staff reports on agency operations, initiatives, and statistical data. This starts on page 40 in your materials. Good morning, Executive Director Buckholz.
Good morning. Well, in your reports today, just as you've mentioned, Chair Oates, you'll see both the conclusion of the fiscal year 2024 and you will see how we are starting fiscal year 2025. Just as a reminder, our fiscal year ends at the end of August and begins on September 1st. So we're in this first quarter. You'll notice that our license holder count is down by just over 300, and that's mostly in the trainee category, which is down about 30%. Our revenue was also down for 2024, and that's because of the reduction in applications, with significant decreases in trainee applications, but then also the AMC renewals. We're watching this closely. This is not a surprise to us to see these numbers come down. Like everything, there is a cycle in this work, and we are just on a downside. As we're paying attention to these numbers, we also, as you know, have initiatives to reduce any barriers to entry into the field. You'll also see, not this time, but in the next round, changes to how we report education in future meetings. This is because of a shift in responsibility that I have just started as of November 1st from Jennifer Wheeler, who's the director of our Education and Examination Services Division. We are moving our board education function from Jennifer to Melissa Tran's wheelhouse under the TALCB umbrella. This means that Melissa will oversee all of the programmatic elements of our work: licensing, education, and enforcement. But TREC will continue to provide support functions for HR, communications, IT, finance, and of course, executive oversight. So this kind of completes the transition for all of the umbrella functions to be under the TALCB umbrella. Any questions there? Okay, later in your, oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So we're moving that under Melissa to run the education piece for our appraisers, and that's great. Do you have the staff to support what she needs on that side? Do we have people in place to help her with that?
We do, and for now, we are not doing any hiring. We have a position available in that we're one down in Melissa's shop, so we have room to hire, but we're not doing that immediately. We're just looking to see what's needed. We want to make sure that Melissa has her arms around those functions.
Okay, and then do we anticipate any major procedural changes once we move over? Or is it going to pretty much from a procedural standpoint be the same as what we've been used to seeing?
I don't think you'll see significant changes, but we will keep you updated as anything changes, but, you know, no.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks to Jennifer Wheeler for all of her work to make this transition an easy one. Okay, later in your agenda, you'll hear a report on the Aero Conference. Ms. Robinson attended, as well as our own staff, Melissa Tran, and then two from TALCB staff, Emily and Ren. Both of them were first-time attendees. Texas was recognized at Aero as only one of 3 states to receive the excellent rating on our ASC audit in both of the program areas, both appraisers and AMCs. I'm really proud of the TALCB team for their accomplishments in this. And Chair Oates, you're exactly right. We've made so many efficiency changes and we have not lost that excellent rating, which is great. Few agency updates I want to mention to you. First is to brag on our staff. This is TREC and TALCB combined. Each October, we participate in the State Employee Charitable Campaign alongside all other state agencies. 2024 marked the 30th anniversary of this generous giving by all state, higher education, and even retired employees through the SECC. And since 1994, employees have contributed more than $209 million to support over 2,000 nonprofits serving Texas. Internally, each year that I've led the agency, I have set a participation goal of 95%, and I've also set a monetary goal, kind of a reach goal. And I have said that if we reached either the monetary or the participation percentage, that I would give New Year's Eve Day off. And we have never come close until this year. I think a huge piece of having a strong, positive culture in an agency is the ability to look beyond ourselves and to encourage that spirit of giving. And I'm proud to say that we ended this campaign with a grand total of giving $21,197 with exactly a 95% participation rate. So the last few hours of the campaign on November 1st, Friday, November 1st, were really a sight to behold. There was a serious amount of peer pressure, and I'm not even sorry about it. But congratulations to our generous staff for reaching this milestone. Building updates. We continue our work on plans for a move to a building at 15th and Congress in a few years. I have learned that the other tenant in this building will be DPS, so we will be very safe in this building. We have a team of folks helping to finalize our floor plans and schematics with Texas Facilities Commission and their vendors. So this gives me hope as we get news of glitches in the building that we are currently in. This building that we are in today is undergoing some extensive electrical work between now and the end of the year. The Facilities Commission has planned these outages to occur mostly on the weekends and holidays when most of the agencies are closed anyway. One such outage occurred last weekend where we had no power in the building. We have 2 more outages coming. One beginning Wednesday, November 27th, just before Thanksgiving, and will conclude Sunday, December 1st, so the end of that weekend. And another Friday, December 20th, starting in the evening and going until Monday, December 23rd. So we'll keep communicating about these outages to our license holders and the public. We have done so already. But I'm warning you of this primarily because it means that our website and our online licensing services portal that people use to manage their own work is mostly unavailable. We will have some presence of our website, but it will not be fully functioning. This is completely outside of our control, but we're making sure that we just warn people ahead of time and support them in any way we can through these. Another project update, we continue to work on the RAMP project. This is our back-end database to replace our Versa system. It's going at a slower clip than I would like to report. This is really a behemoth of a project, and we have a very solid team working on it. Our entire leadership team is involved on a daily basis. We remain in various stages of implementation. One of the first steps of the project is configuration. And we have completed a lot of configuration, but still pieces continue to be configured. As we configure these various pieces of the project, we do that at various times, and then we automate what is configured, and then we test it. And all along the way, we're working on converting the data that will ultimately go into this system. Later, we integrate all of the pieces that we've configured and automated to put together in the final product and test that. So this project has many moving parts. It has a lot of moving parts that I don't even begin to understand. But getting it right is my goal, and I believe we have the right team in place to do that. I am now expecting a late summer implementation. I'm not setting an exact date because I don't want to be wrong, but I imagine that it might coincide with a new fiscal year. But I look forward to the day when I no longer update you on that project. Thank you for completing your cybersecurity training. All 9 of you have completed that as of earlier this week. I am so grateful for that. This will help us avoid a future audit finding. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And then lastly, Chair Oates, as you mentioned, I know this might be the last board meeting for a few of you. It may not be. It is impossible to know. We will honor you if you will allow us at a future meeting once we have we know how all the cards are going to fall on timing and appointments. But I do just want to take the opportunity, Chair Oates, to say what an honor it's been to work with you and Stephanie Robinson and Lisa Sprinkle. You make a difference in this work. I know you do it for no pay. It means the world to me and our staff to work with people who are encouraging and who support the work that we do, and we have felt supported by you. So I'm grateful for each of you, and thank you for your service to the state of Texas. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
As somebody who has their license expiration in November, not this year, but I'm hyper aware of how because I'm a last minute Lucy, I'm hyper aware of how the Thanksgiving holiday can throw things into a little bit of, and so this year, November 30th falls on a Sunday, I believe. So with that outage, are our license holders who are expiring in November aware that all needs to be taken care of before?
Ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Did I not? I mean, we have done communication across the board. Our websites will be down, that sort of thing. What I'm not sure of is if we have done targeted communication for those November license holders. Have we?
Because what would we expect for that to be like?
It will be down. Now, we will allow some grace period. But do y'all want to talk about that? We will create a plan.
Great.
You can stay.
Perfect.
We will create a plan to make sure that November folks are not surprised specifically.
Yeah, and like I said, with a November expiration, we always know that it could happen on Thanksgiving, so maybe don't wait till the very last minute.
Yes. Should we call you Lucy?
Yeah. Okay, I don't, anybody else have any questions for? Director Train, are you going to give any update right now? Okay, but I do have some other questions about sort of specifics that I think probably would be for you. In looking at that our revenue was down about $190,000, but our expenses were also down about $190,000. I think that where we kind of underspent was in professional services. And so I'm wondering, when you look at 2020, fiscal year 23, under professional fees and services, we spent $165,000, but the note says Luna Data Contractor Grant Reimbursed. So that was an ASC grant reimbursement for our, is that what that is?
Yes, that's right. That would be.
Sorry.
That was for,
I wasn't,
developer.
okay. Okay. And then, of course, this year we had budgeted $205,000 for professional fees and services, and we only spent $13,000. Can you remind me what other things would be under professional services? I know at some point we did contract reviewers, so I would just want to make sure that we're not, saving money there and making, licensing take longer. Sorry, Ms. Williams, yeah.
I was going to, ask Mr. Ronaldo, this just so we can hear.
I wasn't sure if, she's watching the money and she's spending the money, so I wasn't sure who to go to.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. So yes, in professional fees and services, I don't know if you recall, but you had asked that we set aside $150,000 for contract reviewers and everything, and we haven't utilized those services, so that's why we still have roughly $165,000 that was left over, because we didn't have to tap into
Yeah,
that because
okay.
Melissa's team been able to handle it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, that was my question. Thank you for that. That's great. So then we ended up with, the sort of a net of the same amount, which is great that we were able to do that. So I appreciate the efficiencies in making that happen. And kind of along those same lines, I'd ask the board members to look at page 76 in your materials, the application processing time. We have from fiscal year 2020 until current fiscal year 25. And I just want to kind of say, look how far we've come. When we had 161 days processing time in 2020, and we're down to 17, no, I'm reading it wrong. We were at 38 days in 2020 for residential and 124 days for commercial, and we're down to 17 and 20. So that's huge accomplishment, being able to stay within our revenue and without going over and being able to accomplish that is, I know that certainly on the general side that in my early days that I got a lot of phone calls about why is this taking so long? This is, these trainees have been working for a pittance for so long, and now this process is just dragging it on. They have families, they, need to start making money, and so that really does matter. It makes a difference, and so we certainly appreciate how far we have come on that. The other thing I wanted to point out is on page 82, our open complaint snapshot. So at our last board meeting, we had 117 open complaints, which it was kind of a lot, but we had, of course, we don't have 117 open, sorry. We had 14 and 14 cases abated and 13 over a year old, and we're down in August to 93 open complaints, and I just looked at our September staff reports and we're actually down to 79. So again, thank you for getting all of those under control. I'm glad that we're able to get those processed efficiently. Also, page 85 in our materials is we got, everybody got a paper copy of the supplement of that. And I just kind of wanted to highlight the reason that I asked for that change, because I think it's important. Because we've had these enforcement cases that have involved multiple states, I've spent some time looking on other state websites for information, trying to see how are they handling the same respondents that we have in a comparison. How is Texas do things differently, better, worse, what I've noticed is that it's really hard to find any information from these other states. They'll have a meeting 2 weeks from now and there's no agenda. There's just nothing. There's certainly not this level of detail. Page 85, the comment section was actually needed to be updated, and it wasn't in our materials. And the reason why I sort of insisted on it being so is because This is our end of the year. So in August, when we have our meeting and we have our materials, it's like June information. So it's not the closeout of our fiscal year. So November is really the only time that we get this in-depth snapshot, because even in our staff reports, they don't go to this depth. So I think it's important at our November meeting that the August closeout of the fiscal year is documented, because, I mean, maybe I'm the only person in the history that goes back and looks at these things to compare them, but it's, you know, especially for an oversight board, when we're trying to look at trends and trying to see where we were last time, to be able to have that information to compare really makes our jobs easier, and it makes transparency so much better. So I appreciate that, and I hope that that continues long after I'm gone, that we have some detail in our fiscal year closeout at every November board meeting. And so that will be on our website, and it will be available so that it's available as long as the meeting materials are available. And lastly, I just wanted to point out on page 65 in our materials and 66, there's some new graphs. And when we're talking about budget, I just want that this information is pretty good, because sometimes we only see the net gain or loss. So we don't know how many are retiring and how many are moving from our trainee category into our GR and L category. And so I think these numbers will help to see that, you know, what's not just what the net loss is, but how many are moving over and how many are retiring. So that's good information for everybody to have as we go forward. I think that was it. I appreciate all the work that goes in. I mean, these are exhaustive. I know that they are. I know that updating all of the different bars and graphs and charts and things is a lot of work, and we greatly appreciate it. It is a service to transparency. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions?
One quick question. Sarah, what other states were kind of like detailed, kind of like this, just in your view? Yeah, I'm just interested.
It almost, some of them are so vague, even in their agendas, that unless, you know, and they don't have audio recordings of them, they don't have any video recordings of them, it feels vastly, vastly different. And it makes me proud that we can be part of a state that does it so much better. But really, there's definitely not budget materials or anything like that.
Yeah, I definitely think Texas stands apart in terms of what we present on our budget and what we present, just transparency as a whole for our program. And we'll talk about Aero later, but even at the Aero conference, we have a meeting that's specific for board members. And a lot of it is they don't have the staff, the agencies are much smaller, and they just don't have those processes in place. And so it is pretty cool to see Texas being the top in kind of how we display information, how transparent we are, the level of detail we present, and then making all of that public online.
Right.
I mean, that is a thing, really, nationwide, that most of them just don't have the capacity or the policies and procedures in place to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So Stephanie, in that regard, confirm for me, there are some states that the staff is so small that they're actually a subset of another agency. In other words, they're not a standalone agency.
Absolutely.
They just are a cog in a gearworks of a larger entity.
Yeah, absolutely. We see some of that. And then also with just the board as a whole, it's interesting. I noticed that a lot of them just don't have policy and procedures to do these types of things. I think they meet and they do the best they can. It's nothing against the other states, because it's what works best for their state. But it was very interesting to see that they are not as detailed at all as the state of Texas in terms of how they run their program. And again, it has a lot to do with size. That's the
absolutely.
thing I saw,
Absolutely.
is that it seems to me it was size, based on the size of the agency and based on the size of the board. So.
And the budget.
Yeah.
And their budget, of course, absolutely. That changes a lot. So.
Right. We have the second most number of appraisers, right, in the country, behind California? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah, with 7,000 license holders, obviously, we have a completely different budget than other states. So that's not a criticism. It's just, I'm glad that we can do it differently. And sort of to reiterate about the enforcement case, our staff investigator that investigated this talked to the homeowners that had this strange person come into their home. And I know that all the other states don't have the resources to do all that. So I understand that they didn't revoke his license probably because they weren't able to do that level of investigation. I do want, because Texas is in those instances, I've asked Director Tran, because we have the resources and we have that information, that to share that with the other states so that they can make prudent decisions about enforcement cases as well. Might as well share that information.
You
right
would be
now.
surprised how many people at Arrow is asking for Director Tran's insight. I mean, seriously, like every meeting I go to, it's always like, well, what is Texas doing? Or can you guys share that? Or how? It really is a big thing, to share our best practices with the industry.
Yeah.
And I think we've done a really good job of doing that through, whether it's speaking at some of these events and explaining what we do or whatever, but you actually would be really surprised how many people need that insight.
Yeah.
And again, nothing bad towards the states. They are trying to improve their programs. So I think that's awesome that they look for us for that guidance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good role.
Very good. If there are no other questions about staff reports, then we will move on. We do not have a need for executive session today, and so we will go past agenda item number 12. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Santos. I did want to say, what we didn't mention in staff reports was that we had that supervisory webinar, and I just wanted to commend staff. It was well attended. We even had people from other states that were attending it, and it was very well put together. Both Ms. Mandel and Director Tran were on top of it, had all the materials, were answering questions in the chat, had links for everyone. It was very, very well organized. So I appreciate you doing that, and I hope that we can do more of it. And if we have people from out of state participate, even better. Ms. Santos, we will move on to your whole section here. Rules for possible adoption. We will start with agenda item number 13. It's on page 99 in our materials.
Madam Chair, board members, good morning. Kathleen Santos, your General Counsel. Before you is agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, section 153.24, complaint processing. Before you in this agenda item, the amendments here just clarify the preliminary investigative review process, and then a little bit of cleanup. We're just fixing a reference within the rule. We did not receive any comments, so staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, section 153.24, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes required for adoption. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton?
I move that the board approve staff's recommendations as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mr. McAnally. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 14 is on page 103 in our materials.
Agenda item 14, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 157, Subchapter B, contested case hearings. More specifically, sections 157.9, notice of hearing, 157.10, right to counsel, right to participate, and 157.11, contested case hearing, entry of appearance and continuance. And so, as Madam Chair mentioned, these are on page 103 of your materials. So this is the first in a series of rules for adoption that are part of the quadrennial rule review that everyone is so excited as I've mentioned previously, this is something that all state agencies are required to do every 4 years, review the rules and make sure that, the reasons for adopting still exist, and either repeal, adopt as is, or adopt with amendments. So here before you, again, primarily cleanup, we're amending to better reflect our procedures for readability and to be more consistent with our abbreviations. We did not receive any comments. Staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 157, Subchapter B, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption, and available for any questions that you might have.
I will say what we are excited about is that we're doing these in pieces and not all at the same time. So don't mistake our lack of enthusiasm.
Madam Chair, move that the board approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Ms. Escalante Castillo. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 15 on page 106 in our materials.
Okay. Discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 157, Subchapter C, Sections 157.17 and 157.18. Again, the amendments here are more of the same. We're simplifying, clarifying language, adding references to our enabling statutes where appropriate, and again, clarity and consistency. We did not receive any comments. Staff's recommendations are to authorize staff on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 157, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Castro?
I move that the board approve staff's recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Castro and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 16 is on page 111 in our materials.
Agenda item number 16, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 157, Subchapter D, specifically Section 157.25, temporary suspension. Again, more of the same, quadrennial rule review. We're cleaning up, and we did not receive any comments. So staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to Section 157.25 as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption, and are available for any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Ms. Santos?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton?
I move that the board approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 17 is on page 114 in our materials.
Item 17, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 157.31, investigative conference. Same as all the others, quadrennial rule review. We're amending to better reflect our procedures and to simplify as needed. We did not receive any comments. Staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 157.31, as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption. I'm available for any questions.
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McAnally and a second by Ms. Escalante Castillo. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Now we move on to rules for possible proposal. Agenda item number 18 is on page 117 in our materials.
Okay. Discussion and possible action to propose amendments to Section 159.204 complaint processing and new Rule 22 Texas Administrative Code 159 sanctions guidelines. So shifting gears a little bit, these are new proposed rules, but they're, what's happening here should not be very new. If you recall, I don't know, maybe more than a year ago, we've made a similar change to our complaint processing rule on the appraiser side, which was to move our sanctions guidelines into its own rule. So that's the big, all the marking out and everything, that's what's happening there, that we're just moving it for clarity, transparency. And then within 153.204, which is the complaint processing rule, we're also amending the language to be consistent with that preliminary investigative review that you all just adopted on the appraiser side. So we're being consistent there. And finally, we're adding language related to the online payment of administrative penalties. This is something that TREC is doing with their rules, and It's really just putting anyone on notice that pays using this mechanism that they would be subject to a transaction fee. And that's not our fee, that's the Department of Information Resources. That's something that all state agencies that do transactions this way are subject to. And so that language is there for that purpose, to put folks on notice that if you do pay this route, you will be subject to an online payment. And so, turn my page.
Can I ask a question? Is that process in a alternative to just mailing in a check?
Yes, it's an alternative method.
Which I wonder if anybody's ever done the analysis of which costs more to process.
Oh, right.
I'm not asking you to, but I'm just saying.
Could you get back to us?
When I say I'm available for questions, really related here, but.
It was rhetorical.
About the same number as the people that use cards at the checkout in the grocery store versus somebody stopping and writing a check.
Does that still happen?
That's a good point.
Yeah, does that still happen?
That's a good point.
So,
Go ahead.
well, I was going to give staff's recommendations.
Please.
Staff's recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code and new Texas Administrative Code Section 159.204 and new 159.203 as presented for publication and public comment in the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal.
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve staff's recommendations.
Can we table that? I have a question.
I'm sorry.
Is that how we do that?
I think if we complete the motion, it's on the
Okay.
table, so.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
So excited
that's
for
okay.
it. I just
No,
wanted to jump
appreciate
on
it.
that.
Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Now we can ask questions again. So on 204F, the change says if, it looks to me like if there was a complaint, then the respondent was automatically sent the complaint and all the information. And this change looks to me like now the respondent might not even hear anything from us if we originally, can figure out what we need to figure out. But if we do need to ask, is that the difference here in this language?
Correct. And that's exactly right. If it isn't, we don't need information from them, we're not notifying them because it's already being disposed of, it's being dismissed. And again, this was something that you all just adopted on the appraiser side, and so we're just being consistent with the two complaint
Very good.
processing
Okay,
rules.
very good. Thank you for that clarification. As a reminder, if that happens that we don't, does the person still know that a complaint has been filed against them?
I'm going to shift around very subtly too. I think I know the answer, but I'm going to get you the expert here.
Yeah, they'll know at the end of the process, so they'll get the notice of the complaint and then the notice of the dismissal at the end.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful to just go, there was a complaint, but
Don't worry about
don't
it.
need anything from you, it's dismissed. I like that. Yeah, no sleepless nights, right? Okay.
Curious, what comes, when that notice is given, that there was a complaint and there is a dismissal, is there any other information provided to that person or to that appraiser? Or is it just simply that?
What it was?
So they get the notice of the complaint with the complaint intake form in it, so they'll see exactly like what was being complained about, and then they'll get the notice of dismissal.
Very good. Yeah, I do appreciate that, because it's always a learning experience, right? Whether it's dismissed outright or not. Okay, so we have, again, a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second by Mr. McAnally. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 19 is on page 129 in our materials.
Okay, discussion and possible action to propose amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Section 153.16, license reinstatement. Before you are amendments to our license reinstatement rule. and they're specific to reinstating licenses for trainees. If you recall, a few meetings back, we kind of made a clarifying change related to licensed and certified appraisers, and now we're going back in and clarifying that process for trainees. And really, it really is an opportunity to reduce barriers to entry. You know, if you don't really know, your career might change direction, you need to go back into a path you had previously got on, and this is a mechanism to allow trainees to do that more efficiently. And so staff's recommendations is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to submit amendments to Texas Administrative Code Section 153.16 as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for proposal. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton?
I move that the board approve the staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. And I wanted to say, and I used to do this at every meeting, but as a reminder, that section, rules for possible proposal, are the first time that we're seeing the rules. They then, as Ms. Santos said, go to the register and are open for public comment, and then they will come back again before this board at the next meeting for adoption, which is the section above that were adoption, so they've already been through that process, and that's the last chance to get public comment or any changes to it. So just, again, as a reminder of the process for those people watching and our license holders. We will move on to agenda item number 20 under rule review. This is on page 131 in our materials.
Agenda item number 20, discussion and possible action to close review of 22 Texas Administrative Code Chapter 155 and Chapter 157 rules. We've come to the end. It's closing time on a rule review. We've gone through all these two chapters. We started back in May, opened it up, made amendments. Now we're adopting it, and now we're closing this chapter. So staff's recommendation is to authorize staff on behalf of the board to close review of 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapters 155 and 157, and I'm available for any questions.
And when will this process open back up again?
Lucky for us, we'll be opening up a new batch of chapters starting in February. We made this change instead of reviewing everything in a single year.
Don't rest on your laurels.
We will just constantly review
Okay.
rules,
Yeah,
but smaller, manageable bites.
sure, great.
You'll miss that.
Madam Chair, I move that the board approve staff's recommendation, please.
I feel like that's undue influence, Mr. McAnally, on your board members. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Reed Lynch. We have a motion by Mr. McAnally and a second by Ms. Reed Lynch. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes, and we are done with rule review. Thank you so much for that heavy lift, Ms.
I have a
Santos.
question, Madam Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Since Tony is not here, who is going to be monitoring legislative?
That actually is going to come up on agenda item number 23. How timely.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, we will be talking about legislative
I'm
initiatives.
happy to answer that question. I should have included that in my remarks. I did on the commission side and just, I don't know what happened in my brain. Summer Mandel will be leading the charge on our legislative initiatives. She and Tony worked together on that previously, and so she will carry that with the help of our general counsels on both sides. I should also mention that I'm in the process of hiring a deputy executive director. I have done those interviews internally, just internal candidates, and should have some news on that front next week. So I'll let you know how that goes. But that job is a little bit different than it was before. It doesn't handle the legislative stuff other than just as an executive of the agency, but it will, and really won't have much involvement with the board, but will be kind of a second to me in a more general sense, oversee agency-wide projects, help with committees and policy development and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank
Very
you.
Yeah, that sort of just fell under Tony's purview because that was his background. Yeah, yeah. Not necessarily a function of that role, but yeah. Very good. Okay, agenda item number 21 under pending business, the report on the fall 2024 Aero Conference. I know Ms. Robinson was the only board member, only one of the board members to attend, and then that we also had staff attend as well. Ms. Robinson, is there anything you want to highlight from us? Where was this conference? This was,
Okay, there we go. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I always love attending these because, you know, you kind of get your ear to the street of kind of what's going on
Yeah.
in our industry, which I
So
think is
appreciate it,
fantastic. Couple highlights. So, first thing, of course, I want to give props to the state of Texas. We were honored, we were recognized twice in the appraisal subcommittee's presentation. Yes, and recognized and asked to stand up and all of this cool stuff for being one of the leaders in the nation in terms of our ratings and kind of how we're doing things. So I thought that was super, super cool. So very proud of our team for that and our leadership and making sure that we're standing out as a state. Because if y'all remember, when I first started, I'm always asking, well, how are the other states doing? Well, how are... And so it's good to see that the state of Texas is being recognized on a national level as kind of the go-to. So I think that's pretty cool. The other thing was one topic that continued to come up was dealing with, I wanted to go back actually, the license holders, as we saw that our numbers were decreasing in terms of license holders and applications and that sort of thing. That is actually happening nationally as well. So that was presented at the conference, that it's not just a Texas thing. I mean, it is actually happening across the board nationwide, which is kind of good to know, because I want to make sure that it's not just something affecting us, it's an industry thing. But what I was going back to, one of the other topics that really came up in pretty much all of the sessions, regardless of the session title, was generative AI. And so that was a major topic that kept coming up. And so I did email Brandy with Arrow to ask that that is included on the next conference, an actual session, workshop, something to where we can address it. And then just to our team here, and I know Melissa's already on it, but just to keep that at the forefront so we can be ahead of the curve in terms of how that's going to affect our industry, our Texans, in terms of license holders and consumers. How does that going to affect our agency? Because whether we like it or not, generative AI is coming pretty much to every industry, and I want to make sure that we are prepared in advance as far as how we're going to handle that, because it does affect all of our stakeholders at this point. So that was a big topic. The other thing I wanted to bring up was I attended a session with industry partners, or something that they called it. And basically it was other associations, industry groups that were sharing what they can offer to the states, regulatory, the boards. And what I found was fascinating is that there are a lot of programs that you guys may have been aware of, but it was new to me, that have diversity initiatives that I thought was super cool. So in that session, we talked about Appraiser diversity initiative that the Appraisal Institute has. And so I'm going to be digging a little deeper into that just to kind of see how we can bring that to Texas and improve what we're doing. There was also a representative from the National Society of Real Estate Appraisers, which is another association that focuses on appraisers of color. So I thought I would meet with them and also just kind of get a better understanding of what they do and how that can benefit Texas. But speaking on the terms of a diversity, so all of those things were pretty cool in the conference. But landing on diversity, when I see diversity, I don't just look at race and ethnicity. I'm looking at the gender diversity. I'm looking at the age diversity. That's one of and also the appraisal subcommittee also presented data on that on a national level in terms of where we were in terms of diversity with male, female, age group, background, ethnicity, and all that. And then we are improving nationwide in those numbers, especially when you look at male versus females in our industry, which is amazing. But we can always do more, right? And one of the things I think we all are aware of is that our industry, in terms of age, it's aging out. And so when I think of diversity, I also think of bringing in the younger generations. Oh, Lisa's so funny. No, not you, Lisa, not at all. But no, when I think of diversity, I also think of bringing in that young, fresh blood too, and like, what can we do to start making sure we're partnering with people that can help us do that? And so I know there's a conference coming up. I hope I didn't miss it, that they told me about, that's going to be in San Antonio, I believe, that's going to be talking about that. And then also there's some, what do you call them? Liaisons, I guess you would call them, in the state of Texas that actually target universities, and they speak to HBCUs, they speak to all universities just to try to get our industry out there. And I didn't even know that. I was like, wait, we're the agency and we didn't even know you were doing that. So I have a couple contacts that I'm going to reach out to that they've given me in the conference to reach out to just to say, hey, you know, I would be happy to go with her just as a part of the group, part of the agency, to just say, hey, what can we do to get these folks in? So I thought that was cool. Things are happening in the industry to bring in younger folks, to bring in women, to bring in people of all backgrounds. And I just think that was really exciting to actually hear that those things are happening. So that's my goal over the next several months, is to try to get a better understanding of that, it's particularly in Texas, and then see what we can bring back to the group to be ahead of it. So some good stuff. It was a very good conference, and I definitely enjoyed it.
And where was it?
Where were we? Boston. Yeah. It's like, I've traveled so much lately. Boston.
Well, we certainly appreciate you going.
It was good.
Thank you. Thank you for going and representing Texas. I hope that we always have somebody that goes there. Mr. DiBiasio, would you mind if you coming to the podium? I just have a question for you about Arrow while we're on the topic of it. Yeah. Yes, sir. I think you've been in this game longer than any of us, so I reach to you for institutional knowledge. As far as, you know, having a Texas board member at Arrow conference, I feel like we've had somebody there always, as far as I can recall. Can you tell us, just as we kind of look forward and we get new board members, what other states participate at a high level? You know, maybe don't, I mean, if you don't want to mention the states that don't ever have any presence, but just kind of the historical Texas participation in Arrow.
Sure. There are a number of states that participate regularly. Obviously, Texas is one of them.
South Dakota?
South Dakota, North Dakota, you know. But then again, there are a handful of states that do not regularly participate. New York, for example, has never participated. Connecticut. Massachusetts participated in this one for the first time because it was right in their backyard. But there are some other states that don't participate on a regular basis, and I think they're really missing out. But there are a number of different reasons for that. Most resource related, travel resources and things like that. But I would say that a significant number of the states are participating on a regular basis. And I will tell you that the spring conference for Arrow is going to be virtual. So hopefully some of those states that don't normally participate will be able to do so in a virtual environment. Although Arrow has done virtual conferences in the past, and those states still don't participate.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what's going on there. But fortunately, most of the states do participate, although there are a few that don't.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I
You're
appreciate your willing to. And again, along those lines, I think it's important for us to attend these conferences as board members. There are certain breakout sessions that are just for board members. And I think, you know, it's important that, A, we're part of the conversation, but also that we know what's going on in our industry. We certainly don't want to be caught flat-footed ever. And so I just encourage all of you to, you know, try and attend when you can, encourage the new board members to do so. I think it is definitely, it has a lot of value. Was there anybody from staff that wanted to talk about Arrow? Any highlights?
Madam Chair, I wanted to ask Stephanie a question.
Yes. Sure, please do.
When you talked about the artificial intelligence and how that impacts, was there any discussion or proposals on policy related to that?
You know what surprised me? It hasn't even gotten to that level. So many, I think so many state agencies were just confused on even where to start. There were, that I'm aware of, I didn't see any real industry experts on generative AI, and especially as it relates to the appraisal industry. So that is a huge opportunity for us, and that's why I reached out to Brandy, who runs the conference, to say, hey, let's dig into this next conference, because right now the conversation is very surface level. It's like they know it's coming, they're kind of afraid of it. What do we do? But it's not anything to be afraid of. It's just a matter of, educating yourself, embracing it, and then figuring out how to do it ethically. But yeah, so no, we didn't even drill down to the policy level, because right now everyone's discussing it simply as a surface level thing. And that's why I know Melissa's already on it, but I shot her a message in the conference and said, hey, we got to get ahead of this, because I want us to be able to go ahead and address it now. Look at how it affects our stakeholders, so that we can be the leaders in policy, creation and all that for that.
I think
for
one
generative
thing
AI.
that's really important to figure out is what are the ethics of artificial intelligence? It sounds a lot like plagiarism to me if you're incorporating parts that are generated by a computer, but I don't know.
That's right. That's what makes it such a great conversation, because, we're not just talking about reports being generated from appraisers. We're talking about calculations that can be generated. We're talking about all sorts of things that generative AI can do. So yeah, it's a good conversation. What's interesting is I also work in higher ed to a certain extent, and when I consult with the universities, 2 years ago, the universities that I consult with, all of them were 100% against AI. Like, they're absolutely no tolerance for generative AI, because they looked at it as plagiarism, right? And so what was interesting now, this semester that I'm starting to consult, they are looking at it as no longer is it prohibited. They make it a requirement in the course, because what they're trying to do is educate our students to be prepared in the workforce. And the workforce is using it whether we want them to or not. It's a thing, they're using it. And so in the university environments, it's actually now part of the policy where instructors have to talk about generative AI, put policies in place as a university, implement those in the classroom so the students are aware of what it is, what it can do, what you shouldn't do.
I use it not to write content, but to check math, to check content, to even go as far as what are the strengths and weaknesses in our argument.
Yeah, absolutely. So it can really be used as an amazing business tool for everyone. But again, it's the ethics behind it, and if it's being used correctly. And then too, as we know, generative AI is fairly new, so the accuracy is also a thing, right? As with any technology launch of this massive scale, you're going to have issues with accuracy and that sort of thing, because it learns as it goes. So so that's another thing, that if we are using it, we want to make sure that we are verifying our references, that it actually is producing legitimate information, particularly related to statistics and those types of things. Accuracy tends to be an issue with that. So it's a fun conversation, because it's happening no matter what, but it's going to be fun to dig into.
You've touched on a lot of what I was going to ask, but I have a group and we're using the language model.
Yeah.
But you always have to make sure it's not hallucinating.
Yeah.
But you mentioned on generative AI, were there any discussions of any companies or businesses that are developing it just for valuation purposes, or did it just stay at a very general level?
To my knowledge, I don't think that they talked about any companies that's tailoring it to appraisers or to our industry, but ooh, would that be a great entrepreneurial venture?
It sure would.
That would be
I'm just
awesome.
waiting to see when that will occur.
So
That'd
an
be
anecdote for that is my kids obviously use it, on such a massive scale. What they do with it is kind of mind-boggling. But my son kept saying, Mom, I know that you could use it in your work. I know that you could use it. And so he said, what about just checking the math? And so I put in a direct cap statement, and it immediately said, this is valuating real estate, and we cannot be part of that. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. So then I tried to take out all the things that made it look like real estate, the per square foot, like all that, and it still said, nope, this is a valuation, I guess because like the cap rate is at the end, so that's probably pretty indicative of what it's trying to do.
It
But
depends on the platform you're using.
well, yeah, and I was using ChatGPT. It was the only one at the time.
And what's crazy too with generative AI, there's so many platforms now. ChatGPT, of course, led the charge on that, but there's so many different platforms now too that it depends on the platform in terms of kind of how you can use it and what it's going to allow you to do.
Sooner or later,
But-
it will be.
Yeah, right.
But that's what I'm saying. It's such a
I
fun
was
conversation.
so
'cause
pleasantly
it's-
surprised. I was like, very good. Follow the rules.
That's what I had to do to convince our lawyers for us to start, on a test pilot program. Is they said, well, we're afraid of it wandering off into to unknown territory or to illegal territory. So I said, give me a chance to do some bad stuff with it. And ChatGPT did exactly that. If I asked for MLS data, it said, we can't do that. You need to go to this board or that board or whatever.
Yeah.
So the guardrails are already pretty pretty well established that it would not wander off in that direction.
Yeah. So it's a conversation.
For some of our clients are now having RFPs and LOEs that are saying, if you utilize AI at any point in your report, you have to disclose it.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's just, it's for certain clients, it's not for everybody, but you got to read that. You got to read that LOE and make sure that, and if you're utilizing that you disclose it, because it doesn't tell you to disclose it where you used it, where it just says you have to disclose it at some point. And it might be one of those things that they add to the limiting conditions and something.
But at the same time, we're responsible for everything in the report, no
agree.
matter what the source.
That is true.
I agree.
But that's where we go into policy and procedures, right? Of being able to set that framework of what we accept, in terms of an agency and in terms of how our appraisers can actually use it. But I will tell you also in academia, when you're conducting research and publishing peer-reviewed articles, those types of things, that is acceptable practice, that some people are accepting those in research journals, but you absolutely have to disclose it as you would any other reference that you're referencing. If you're producing research and you quote someone else's research, you have to describe that. You have to reference that in your research, right? And so that's how they're treating generative AI. And it's fluid, so sometimes it changes.
Right.
But that's one of the ways that they're trying to mitigate unethical behavior is by saying you must reference you must reference where you use that, and then use in-text citations on where you use what paragraph was, generated. So it's a deep conversation. It's a lot to it, but it's coming, and I just want to make sure as an agency that we are proactive and that we're ready to address it when the time comes, when it really hits our industry hard.
And if you hadn't been to Arrow, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I so appreciate it.
Yeah, so Arrow is awesome. It really does give us a lot of good things to think about. And you hear from others. I love it because of the other states being there. And that's my biggest thing is I want to hear what are other states doing.
Yeah.
And that's a great platform to do that. So
Well, I would like, since the next one is virtual, when is that? Do we know the month? That May? May is when that, and then do we know where the next, the spring, do we know where the fall Arrow is going to be?
Where
Oh, okay.
spring will be virtual, and is it in April or May? Do you know? May. We're about to give
May.
you a date.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I have a question that Stephanie brought up about the liaisons to universities. Being on the education committee, we had discussed this a long time ago, trying to reach out and encourage people to take the subject in school. So I'm just throwing this out there for the next education committee, that if we could have people working with those liaisons or prepare a short, like the cybersecurity stuff that we took, a video to explain the role of the TREC and our board and all of that kind of lay out some of the rules that we go by so that they're not so afraid, how we track the trainees and so forth. I think that would be very helpful to do something like that and provide it to the liaisons. I'm not saying we do it.
Right.
I'm saying to provide it to the liaisons, and it's up to them if they want to use it, but we would strongly suggest that they have the students become familiar.
I love that idea. That is a
Beneficial.
great idea. Because I think right now the liaisons are going out on behalf of the industry, right? They're just representing the industry to try to get people in the industry. But you're absolutely right. We can equip them with the tools to help really explain that process for our Texas appraisers. That's a great idea. Uh-huh. Can we do that? Can we put that on the education agenda? Just something to, yes, we are the committee, so put that on our agenda.
You know, Lisa, that's actually such a, when we talk about so many appraisers get into the business because they have a dad or an uncle or a mom or somebody who's in it, so it doesn't feel so unknown and overwhelming. And so it's kind of bridging that gap for people who have no familiarity with the profession is a great idea.
Process of meeting all the requirements.
Yeah, right.
And all of that, and knowing that Texas is so good.
Yeah,
at the control and
Yeah.
regulation that we have.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
Yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. And along those lines, Ms. Robinson, if you find opportunities after my term is over, that is something I would absolutely be interested in
appreciate
continuing to do, you know, so if you find opportunities, I would like to do that.
Thank you.
So I would like to ask the board members that in the May conference, because it is virtual, that everybody try and attend at least one virtual, you know, it's probably an hour or an hour and a half or something. And, but that's such a great opportunity when we don't have to spend the money on travel. And I know everybody's busy, so traveling in itself is difficult, but this is virtual. So I would just ask that everybody try and attend, you know, one of the sessions virtually in May.
We did find those dates, April 29th through May 1st. And what we can do is study that agenda and point y'all in some directions that might be like a helpful session
Yeah,
to attend.
absolutely.
And then the fall conference is in Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta, very good. Very good. If we could go ahead and send an email to the board members and just to put that on their calendars with the April 29th to May 1st so that they are looking out for some time to block off on those days, that would be great. Okay, anything else about Aero before we move on? Thank you again for attending. We're moving on to new business, agenda item number 22. Discussion and possible action regarding nominations to create a slate of candidates for the offices of Vice Chair and Secretary of the Board. So kind of as a reminder today, we'll create a slate of candidates, and then at the February meeting, we'll hold a vote, but we can also make nominations at the February meeting. And as a reminder, by statute, the Vice Chair serves as the AMC Committee Chair, and so that needs to be considered. Open the floor to nominations. If there are none today, I think that's fine. I hope that, you know, we see what the new leadership is and kind of figure it out from there. I'd hate to kind of solidify anything, you know, if I'm not going to be here. So, but certainly open for nominations if there are any at this time.
Madam Chair?
I want to renominate Martha Gale Reed Lynch as vice chair.
Well, what I was going to add,
You were going to nominate him?
I was going to nominate myself. No. No, you know, it just seems appropriate to me at this point because, as you said, that you likely will not be here at the next meeting and that we are going possibly have a new chair. And I was just going to say that I know that the board does not participate in the nomination of the chair. But what I was going to say was I think that just based on his leadership, I'd like for the governor's office and to consider Chance Bolton. I have enjoyed working with him. I mean, he's knowledgeable, a good leader, and That was all I was going to say.
Well, thank you for that.
So this is mutual admiration, obviously.
Well, thank you for that. I think, I don't think that.
Everybody should know.
We don't have a
everybody
point.
else, and then we have a
Right,
point.
yeah, but I'm sure that your opinion matters to them, to the governor's office. I mean, I would hope that it does, so I think that, I appreciate you saying that publicly.
Thank you, Martha, I appreciate that.
Sure.
Any other nominations? So we will leave those open until the February meeting. I would also remind you all that at the February meeting, committee appointments are made, and so if you have any desire to do something different, I'm happy to take those notes and pass them on to whomever is chair next time, or if I'm still here, then I will obviously consider them as well. If anybody would like to serve on a different committee, if anybody would like to serve on a new committee or change, bow out. I mean, we ask that everybody at least participate in one committee, so that we all share the load. So that will be open as well in February. Very good. Moving on to agenda item number 23, discussion and possible action regarding legislative initiatives. And this is going to be both Ms. Mandel and Ms. Santos. They're listed on page 133 in our materials. The legislative session starts in January, so I'm glad that we're getting ahead of the game.
Good morning, y'all. Okay, there we go. I am Summer Mandel, Government and Strategic Communications Director, for the record. I usually have to present to the commission, but today I get to present to y'all, so thank you so much. As Chelsea said, I will be handling legislative related issues for the agency, so both TREC and the board. And just to give you a little bit of clarity on what that is, since, you know, this was kind of Tony's thing, but he was also Deputy Executive Director, the role is to be the connector between the agency and any legislative offices, and that's not just during legislative session. That can be throughout the year. They get constituent inquiries a lot, and they will reach out to us for more information. And so it actually makes sense having that kind of with a communications person, because my job is to filter all this stuff through, get it to the right people, and just give, you know, get to the point, the core of what they're looking for. But session is coming up. So bill filing started on November 12th, and there were nearly 1,500 bills filed that day. Yeah. And I went through all of them. And by I went through all of them, I read all the captions and then read further the ones that seemed like they were relevant to us. So that's also part of the job, is tracking what's being put out there. So right now we're tracking about 90 bills. None of them are related to the appraisal industry directly, but I will be looking for that, and most of them will be about agency, how the agency runs, so like HR kind of stuff, and then there's a lot more on the TREC side of things, but certainly I will keep y'all aware. And that's another reason why I'm up here. Met with the executive committee to just run by what I'm thinking as in terms of updating y'all throughout session. So just kind of a high level overview of the things that we're tracking with periodic updates. And then we can just go with that. And I welcome your feedback during this, since it's the first time I'll be providing that to you. So if there's a different way you want that information, or you need more information, I'm very flexible. The whole point is to be helpful to you. So please feel free to chime in on that. So other key dates for session. So the first day of the 89th Texas Legislature, their regular session, is on Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. And then the 60-day filing deadline is Friday, March 14th. And then sine die, which is the last day of session, it's 140 days, is on Monday, June 2nd. So that's kind of later in the year. To be determined on whether there will be special sessions. That's up to the legislature and the governor to call those. If they were called, then I would be doing the same thing of just making sure I'm tracking and keeping up with what's going on. So with that, I also want to mention that as an agency, we're not lobbyists. We are just here to provide factual information. So that might include testimony on bills, and typically that's going to be Executive Director Buckholtz coming, and they'll just ask, what is the impact on this? Do you need more staff? But we're never for or against something. We're happy to do whatever the legislature would like us to do. But with that said, there are some things that when we review the statutes that we must abide, there can be some cleanup pieces, things that we want to have to communicate to legislative offices to say, hey, this is something that we need to look at and maybe remove. And typically it's pretty low-key, non-controversial things. So it's kind of confusing, I think, because we do interact with the legislature in that way, but just really want to be clear that it's not in a lobbying fashion in any sort of way. So General Counsel Santos, she's going to go through the legislative items that we have for this session. And then, of course, I'm happy to come back and answer any questions or answer them now.
I just had a quick question, and thank you so much for stepping up to the plate for this position. I think you're right. As a communication person, this is a great fit. So when you come across bills that affect TALCB, you communicate those on an ongoing basis. So we're just tracking the progress of those. Is that how it's? So it won't be like a quarterly communication or a board meeting only communication.
Correct.
You just kind of email us as those bills come up?
Yes, that's correct. And then I can also update you on state agency types of things. But again, I think that would be pretty easy. So for instance, there's a bill, it's actually a refile from last session that wants to increase longevity pay for state employees from $20 to $50. So I imagine that would just be like a bullet for your information type thing. Anything that has more of an impact would have a little bit more of an analysis for you, but still trying to just keep it light, because until we really get moving and bills start going to hearings, a lot of bills will just die off. So while there's 1,500 right now, only a fraction of those are actually going to make it to a hearing, and then it's got to keep moving and go all the way to the governor's desk. So I think as session progresses, there will be more substantive communication about key bills for y'all, but I think they would be anything that's related to what we are seeking that we'll go over. So is that or anybody else? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Santos, what I failed to mention earlier is that on this list of initiatives, what is missing is the 2025 sunset of this agency that we expected 5.5 years ago when I started, and because of our great work is not part of our 2025 legislative initiative. So I failed to mention that earlier. I don't know how I did, but that was certainly a relief to all of us.
Hello again, everybody. So for my part of this discussion, I'm going to go into the specific initiatives before you. And as you mentioned, on page 134, we have a summary chart of these initiatives. All were presented to the executive committee and were supportive, but there is one that is not on this list that I will speak to also, and I'll point that out specifically. So you can see from the chart that most of the activity is in 1104. I'll take the first one. This one is, I call like the administrative penalty language. This is cleanup. I think it's fair to call it that. This would make our administrative penalty statute on the appraiser side, or on the AMC side, consistent with that on the appraiser side. I think it was sunset, about 2019, they made this change to the appraiser statute to go ahead and pay the admin penalties assessed against an appraiser into the general revenue fund. And that changed from the educational studies, was just that fund we've been spending down.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go ahead and make that same change on the AMC side to be consistent. I'm not sure if that was just an oversight left out, but this is administratively is more efficient to go ahead and make this change. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to move on to I'm actually going to skip down to the references to the commissioner. This is easy, cleanup. There were 2 references that were left out, and that changing commissioner to executive director, so we're going to go ahead and ask to make that change. And then moving back up on the list, potentially primary contact. Okay, so AMCs are required to have a primary contact, a controlling person who's a primary contact between the AMC and us, the agency. And so there's some eligibility requirements. You're either required to be, the statute currently says, a certified appraiser or someone who's taken X number of USPAP hours or USPAP courses. Well, what we'd like to add is licensed or in front of the certified appraiser, because licensed appraisers are already required to take those USPAP courses. So administratively, that makes us easier to verify that this person can serve in this role as a licensed appraiser, then ask them for their CE or ask them that confirmation that they've taken this course. And so this really is another example of cleanup and then making the agency more efficient.
Okay.
Everyone following me? Okay, great. So moving on to, I think we're on the fourth one, the amend to prohibit an AMC from having a controlling person with a suspension, revocation, or probation. So this is one where the way our statute is currently written, if a controlling person has a suspension, revocation, or probation, that is grounds for denying an original application, or the initial application, and renewal. What is not clear currently in our statute is our ability to take action at any other time. And so what we're trying to do is close that loophole. And part of the motivation for that is it has been a loophole that has been exploited. You know, there is the potential there for someone on renewal or application submitting certain persons, and then maybe their org chart changes suddenly, and then here comes renewal again. And so this really closes the loop on the agency being able to fulfill its role as a consumer protection agency, protect the public, and be able to act on those circumstances. Does anyone have any questions?
No, but as a reminder, that comes straight from Dodd-Frank language, so that's why we feel like that's important. You know, that's an important monitoring tool.
Okay. And I'll move on to the new one, 1103. So I know some of you in our announcements, you know that we received that ASC grant for stipend funds that we could administer to aspiring appraisers for completing their experience either with one of these newer ways, with PAREA or a different program, but also going the traditional route. And so the legislative changes that we're seeking here is the authority to administer that program, because it is new. It's not really currently in our wheelhouse. That'll give us the authority to do it. As part of that authority, I think that would include, one, the authority to do it, and two, rulemaking authority to line out whatever, or outline whatever eligibility criteria to fill in the details of administering that program. If, you know, application dates, you need this, we're going to take this into consideration, rulemaking authority to do that. And so, you know, when I contemplated what this program could look like, yes, we have grant funds now, but we may not have grant funds in the future. So as part of that administrative authority, there'd also be a rulemaking authority for a fee if needed. And so I know sometimes you say fee, it tends to have like a knee-jerk reaction, but this is truly just forward thinking of, you know, if the program is a success and somehow these grant funds run out, there would be a mechanism for a future board to take action to continue that if that was the will of the board. And so that is essentially the legislative framework for that program, for that initiative. Questions?
And when would that specific language be available for us to?
There is very real language that exists right now, but next week with the GCs on the Trek side, we have a lot of our bills that are going to go through staff to make sure that we consider everything administratively. And then I think at that point, we'll have a better product to be able to share with you all that has all that into consideration.
Very good.
Okay. And then the final thing that I will mention that is not here on this list, I'll go back in time a little bit. Last session, SB 510 made confidential certain contact information of occupational license holders. I think the motivation behind that was, unwanted contacts, spam contact. But what we've found out, more vocally on the TREC side, I've heard some on the Appraiser side, and then other occupational licensing agency, was that some of these folks do want to be searchable, to be discoverable. They do want some contact information out there. So what we're seeking here is the ability to collect business contact information to distinguish between the two, because the way our statute's currently written, it's sort of combined, or maybe, it wasn't contemplated to have multiple types of communications at the time it was written, but that is the legislative change we would be seeking for that.
Yeah.
Any questions? And so staff's recommendations is to direct staff to proceed with the legislative initiatives as presented.
So what Ms. Santos gave me a little more background on that. To be clear, if we are giving that we're not the only agency, TREC and TLCB are not the only two agencies that would make this change where you would make license holder information searchable. It's happening in a lot of different agencies. So they sort of wrote one bill that applied to everybody, and then it turns out it really didn't work for some different industries. And so, I would say as an AMC myself, if I'm trying to find an appraiser in Alpine, Texas, he or she probably wants to be found. I'm trying to give them business. And so that's, so I do think there are instances like that where having a searchable database is
Thank you
beneficial.
for bringing that up. I was intending to mention that this is something that's a little bit of a moving target. I think we have language in mind that affects our statute, but there's a bit of a coalition amongst occupational licensing agencies to kind of get on the same page. So whether this is something is part of a larger group or just our thing, that's still TBD.
Yeah. Any questions for Ms. Santos?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolton?
First off, I would say if you are living in Alpine, you are not trying to be found. Secondly, I move that the board approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mr. McAnally. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Look forward to a interesting legislative session. Agenda item number 24, discussion and possible action for the creation of an AMC working group for the review of Chapter 159 rules. This was what we talked about earlier.
Okay,
This is on page 135.
Yes.
So this was something that we brought to the AMC Advisory Committee, as you mentioned. It was something that, talking to Melissa, staff would greatly benefit from having sort of a small circle to have more efficient meetings, get down in the details about that whole process, and that would inform our rules for 159, which I know everyone is waiting when we're going to do rule review for that, and that is scheduled for 2026. So we have a good runway. This is a good time to start this process to inform those rulemaking changes that would come of this. And, ideally, we'd have representatives from that entire appraisal management process, a mortgage broker, lender, a residential appraiser, an AMC. Right now, we do have someone, Frank Towery, on the advisory committee who is willing to serve, lead that AMC capacity. And our own Ms. Paula Escalante Castillo has expressed her willingness to serve in that. I think it's like kind of could be public member. You have some banking background, but we're still looking for more folks to fill in these other roles. But at the very least, if staff can go ahead and start this process of forming that working group, that would help us greatly. And amending our rules that make sense, in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of 159 was written by staff before there was the creation of the AMC Advisory Committee. And again, it was 2011, 2012, when we just didn't really know the applicability of this, of the rules in the statute. And so now that we do have, at least a decade behind us, that we look at them, and I just ask, not all of the rules really need to be dug into, they're just kind of administrative stuff, but some of the important stuff, I would just ask that, when we review them, that we really look at those and make sure that we're getting all the stakeholders' input so that we can write them well and make it reflective of where we are in the industry now.
You mentioned you were looking for people to fill the roles. What are the roles that you have open? How many people do you need?
We were looking for someone who, in AMC, we have someone from the AMC, Mr. Frank Towery, someone who would be a public member, Ms. Escalante Castillo, is open to serve in that capacity, but also like a mortgage broker. We had a few leads on residential appraisers, and then someone in lending.
Someone in what? I'm sorry. What was the last one?
Lending.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think having a residential appraiser, part of that is paramount to the success of it.
So,
I would also like for it to be in an environment that feels very open to, so many times the way things really work is not necessarily the way things, publicly we talk about, for example, using trainees to sign on, if you talk to an appraiser off the record about how all of that works, it's kind of different in that sense. And they say, and then these people don't allow it, but then those people say, yes, we do allow it. So, like getting to the real part of it so that we can make.
That's a great point, and I think that's why, we know the advisory committee exists, but in a working group, it is a little more informal, a little more candid, and then, our intention would be to still bring everything up through that advisory committee, all those changes, so there'd still be that part of the process in place.
Yeah, okay. Very good.
And so staff's recommendation is to create a staff-led working group comprised of representatives of those involved in the AMC process to advise staff on AMC-related matters, including potential changes to AMC-related rules.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Reed Lynch.
move that the board approve staff's recommendation. Excellent.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Reed Lynch and a second by Mr. Eichelberger. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes. This takes us, thank you, Ms. Santos. This takes us to future meetings. Any agenda items for future meetings? I think we have kind of a running list of what we picked up from today. And as always, there's stuff to be added as we go through the next few months of committee meetings and conversations. 26, discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. The calendars are on page 137 in our materials. So we have set the next meeting for February 21st, 2025, and just want to confirm that that still works for everyone. There's no conflicts. So that will be when we meet again. Tentative future meeting date on May 16th. Again, that's if anyone doesn't have any conflicts, then we will keep that date on the calendar. August 2025, that seems like an awful long way to schedule something. Can we push that off until the February meeting to schedule the August date? I would remind those of you with children in school to look at their calendars. They're probably published by now of your school year of when school starts in August so that you can make sure you're not gone for meet the teacher dates. So August 2025 TBD. Anything else? If nothing else, then I just want to say again that thank you to everybody for this wonderful journey. And I hope to see you all when I'm just a regular license holder.
I wanted to thank you, Chair, for your leadership and for the opportunity to serve the public as my role, and being able to openly speak in these meetings representing whoever we represent. And I appreciate the whole system and how it worked. So thank you.
Thank you also, Ms. Wrinkle.
Madam
Everyone-
Chair, I'd just like to say, I appreciate your leadership. I think
Said we weren't going to do this.
you've really become a role model on how we as a board can function and see forward. I appreciate your leadership and thank you for your service.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bolton. It's been a pleasure to work with all
I
of you.
would just like to add that you've always listened to us. You know, you've always listened to us, and you were so articulate in leading us, and the energy and the intelligence that you brought. You know, many, many times I would have to say, well, I didn't think of that, or I didn't catch that. And you always brought it up, and it was great. It was a great way to handle this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And that is part of the reason why I do feel like it's time for me to go, because I think that with new leadership, there is new energy, there is new fresh eyes on things. And I think for any oversight board, that is an important thing, and new ideas as well. So
I would just say what everyone else is saying. And in addition to that, also the level of detail, the importance of drilling down and looking at the detail has been really, really critical. And I think it's added a lot of value to the board. But you've done well.
Thank you
You've
so
done
much.
well, we appreciate you.
thank you. I've appreciated serving with all of you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, I know you
gonna be
don't want
super-
any of this at all. I know you don't want any of this at all, so I'm going to be short. I second.
Thank you. It's going to be really awkward if I'm back here in February, isn't it? All right, safe travels, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.